It is that time. We're going to be finally doing our first AEW pay-per-view predictions here finally. We're kind of getting back to that just because AEW always has super stacked cards, so we're going to get right into it. Our first match we're going to look at is actually on the 0 hour, which is like their pre-show, essentially. And it's going to be for the TBS title, and it's going to be between Alex Windsor and Marina Shafir. This is going to be a hard-hitting ass match. I mean, Marina, like I said, part of, the Death Riders, and they've been kind of on a tear. I mean, I know since kind of, Moxley did lose the initial AEW World title and then kind of stepped down for a bit. There was kind of a lull, but I think, especially with the kind of continental run that he was on, and that, kind of the feud between, Marina and Tony that was kind of going at the same time with like Wheeler Yuta there and Orange Cassidy, kind of really reinvigorated, I think, Marina as a character, and I think got a lot more interest and a lot more kind of heat on her as well, especially I think her kind of hitting it up with Mina and Tony. So I think kind of going into this TBS match, there's a lot of fire for her. Alex, on the other hand, while she, like I said, she's a boss, she's extremely awesome, and I think honestly should be going for the tag team championships with Jamie Hayter. She is kind of in this position with this title, and she is kind of, I mean, she can easily be kind of a top of the card talent as well. So it's kind of, this is one of those ones where I think it could kind of go either way, but I think to serve the story, it would be more interesting, I think, if Marina did take the TBS title here and finally had a title to kind of run around within the Death Riders to kind of up her status a notch within the group, I think. And I think kind of her holding a title kind of next to Moxley, potentially with the Continental title, would be a really interesting prospect if they want to go down that line, maybe. I think at the end of the day, though, Marina is going to take it over Alex. It's going to be a really fun match, though, I think, to be on the 0 hour. They should be on the main card, I think, since it is the TBS title. Just in general, I think they do need to do a better job, I think, of booking the women's segment so it's more context and nuance than simply showcasing a lot of them in matches, and yes, allowing them to get more gimmick matches and stuff like that, but given the context and the time to breathe in their segments like you do for the dudes, I think with like on Callis family, the multiple segments that will happen for them, that they're trying through multiple matches, that type of focus needs to happen for, I think, a lot more of the stories happening in AEW. Regardless, I think Marina's going to take this one. It's going to be a really fun match, though. Kind of like a European wrestling catch style versus like that MMA hard hitting. Gonna be really fun. Second match we have on the card, we have the returning Chris Jericho against Ricochet, which should be a really fun match. I mean, obviously, Jericho is kind of, up there in age at this point, but he can still go, and I think, psychology wise, he's always been one of the best. So he kind of has, even in his later years, pulled out some of the best matches of his career with a lot of top talent from around the world. So I kind of don't expect a miss here between him and Ricochet. Ricochet is kind of the perfect heel for a returning Jericho to kind of have Jericho make, be, foil, essentially, or be Jericho would be the foil to essentially Ricochet here, and I do see Jericho kind of coming back and winning one over Ricochet. I think a lot of people might be mad at that type of win and see it as kind of a blemish on Ricochet, but in reality, like, it's Jericho, he's a legend. Him coming back, and them kind of feuding with each other, I think already is kind of a rub towards Ricochet anyway, and I think especially when this was just kind of fresh, and we had Jericho kind of come back with the list on Dynamite a couple nights ago, so against Ricochet, and it was a really fun, like, lighthearted segment. So I think this match is going to be a lot of fun, and if they do continue to feud past this, I think it's just going to be a really fun kind of lighthearted feud that will be entertaining from both sides. I think Ricochet and Jericho know how to kind of play into the goofiness of things, especially Ricochet now. I think in this whole heelish AEW run, he's shown a lot more character here because he's been allowed to be kind of more goofy and less serious, but it's allowed us to kind of take him more serious as a heel, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I think he's kind of found that stride with his character there, and him and Jericho kind of working. I think with Jericho kind of doing this anti, like, kind of bringing back the list and doing kind of this anti-hero kind of shtick for the crowd since he's been returning, so people are clamoring to see him again, is kind of perfect. So I do kind of see Jericho winning here. I could see maybe Ricochet getting like a surprise win to further the feud, but I do kind of see Jericho coming back and getting a clean W here over Ricochet. So You see Jericho taking that right there. And then we have a tag team match here, one of the two that's going to be happening tonight. And man, this looks so cracked. It might be the match of the night. So it's going to be the Young Bucks versus Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita, sorry. So Don Callis family essentially against the face Young Bucks, who, you know, essentially with the Don Callis family being essentially the huge, big kind of vision-like presence on AEW right now, you know, both Konosuke and Okada are kind of not seeing eye to eye and have always been kind of 1A, 1B, even before, you know, both of them were kind of formerly in the Callis family. And we kind of have seen that tension kind of boil over finally in the last couple of weeks, kind of with Don Callis family, you know, doing things, and both these alphas kind of doing their own things and not necessarily helping each other in their own affairs. So a lot of times, a lot of things blow up and they'll blame each other, etc. And they're kind of being forced to essentially tag together and go after the Young Bucks, which I think on paper, this match is going to be cracked as heck. I do think, though, the Young Bucks are going to take the W, just because this dream team of Okada and Konosuke can only work if they decide to put aside their differences and, you know, overcome the Young Bucks. And I think that might be the storytelling of this match. And I think it's going to be probably the match of the night, too. But I do think either Konosuke or I think it's going to be Konosuke might either even turn face here. That might cost them the W. But I do think it might just be a communication breakdown, and they might slowly try to have Konosuke turn face over time. I do see the Young Bucks regardless taking this W here. It's going to be such a good match too. I mean, all the matches, I mean, that's the thing with AEW. Every match here, can easily steal the show, and I think that's kind of paramount to what they do. Speaking of essentially meddling in the Don Callis family affairs, we have Andrade versus Darby Allin. Andrade, a kind of newer member of the Don Callis family, after kind of that recent WWE exit, you know, has kind of been lighting up the indie place on fire, and AEW as well, with kind of toppling a lot of the top talent. Came back, you know, might have cheated, but won over Omega, and has kind of ascended to closely contending for the world title. Darby Allin, someone who has also recently returned, has a similar trajectory, but sees the obvious obstacle in the Don Callis family. Don is kind of privy to that and wants Darby essentially taken out, you know. I think essentially MJF putting the hit up to Darby Allin for what do you call it, Andrade, to kind of go for, to distract him, I think cleverly, from the world title, since MJF holds it. So this match kind of, in a way, is another kind of almost number one contenders match when you kind of see it through that story lens, which I think is actually kind of cool. Either way, this is going to be a super fun match, and this is one that actually, in my opinion, could go either way. I do think ultimately, actually, Darby Allin will be the one to take the title from MJF, but I don't think you're going to do that right away. So I could kind of see Andrade cheating to essentially win, put Darby away, and fast track himself to a world title match against MJF, essentially. And I think there would be essentially a narrative that seems to be playing out right now, where Andrade is kind of just tired of MJF and wants to get directly to him, and is tired of Don Callis trying to, you know, play buddy with MJF and make a deal. I do kind of see Andrade taking this one on Darby Allin, even though you never know, because Darby is, in my opinion, from what I've seen kayfabe wise, Darby Allin is one of the hardest opponents. That's why there's a reason that MJF does not want to face specifically Darby Allin, and that's all I'm gonna leave it at, you know. So he could just win. Darby Allin could just win, because in my opinion, Darby Allin will kill a man. And he's tried, he has survived being killed. So he's like, to me, Darby is Darby wins lol sometimes, which, you know, if you know, should be interesting. I do think Andrade story-wise will be taking it, because I think they want to do that first before maybe hitting Darby Allin versus MJF. I think they want to save that for like a big pay-per-view. Another big one-on-one matchup that we have here that kind of features the Death Riders and but I guess reminted United Empire kind of old leader alumni. Will Ospreay kind of returned to Japan as well to kind of crown Colum Newham, I think, as essentially, since he has won the IWGP title and is part of United Empire, I assume the new leader, kind of to crown him and knight him essentially as that leader. And, you know, with that, we have essentially the bone to pick, our obvious bone to pick as well, with Jon Moxley, who was the one who put him on the shelf, essentially, initially taking him out and doing that nasty chair spot to his neck, essentially, when the Death Riders were running roughshod over everybody in their kind of heyday. This could go either way, but I do think a returning Ospreay can kind of suffer a loss here to Mox, just because I do think shenanigans will happen. I don't think it will be necessarily a clean win, and I do think that this feud can actually be elongated into maybe a trilogy of matches with like maybe a gimmick involved towards the end, because I think that would be this initial match that they will have will be really interesting and fun. But I do think, to play to the strengths of like maybe Moxley and the crazy ideas that they both can have in some spots, I think a gimmick match to like maybe solidify the blood feud would be really interesting here. That being said, that's why I do think Moxley is going to take this. It's going to be probably an amazing match. Like I said, this can also be another match of the night. I do see Moxley taking this one with shenanigans, furthering that feud. I do think some United Empire people might get involved. I do think, you know, a bunch of Death Rider people are going to get involved. It's going to be super overbooked, but it's going to be super fun. You see Moxley kind of taking it and retaining his Continental Championship. Here we have then another world title match for the AEW tag title. It's going to be FTR versus Cope and Christian, or Cope and Cage. I kind of like how they're doing that. I do think that they can do a better job of booking their tag division in general, AEW. I think there's been really bright spots before in a lot of the stuff that I have been watching, and I think like obviously FTR being one of those foundational teams to kind of AEW is kind of an example of that. And you know, this essentially story building up of how FTR essentially betrayed Edge and betrayed betrayed that whole faction that they kind of had built up, you know, and essentially Edge kind of regaining the trust of Christian after their blood feud and stuff, you know, to kind of lead to this moment, I think is really fun and interesting. I think because AEW, it seems like, I'm not too familiar with their, you know, booking decisions too much since I've been watching really only recently and retroactively. I do feel like they might actually give Adam Copeland and Christian Cage the titles here for a really feel-good pop, just because I feel like this show is going to be really heel heavy, like winning wise for the most part. So I do think that Cage and Cope are going to take the tag titles here, and hopefully what is a really fun match. And you know, FTR, you know, one of the best tag teams ever in my opinion. They've wrestled in my favorite tag match ever. So you know what I mean. That's how I kind of feel about FTR. They're one of the best of all time. So I know they can have a really good match with one of the also tag team greats, one of the other best tag teams ever in their reformation. That should be extremely exciting. A very all-out level, or WrestleMania, you can even say level, like match. I think should be really fun. But I do think that it's going to be a feel-good win for Cage and Cope. One of the co-main events, which this might actually be match of the night too. The AEW Women's World Championship match between one of my favorites, challenger Jamie Hayter and the champion Thelka. Jamie Hayter, I was a big fan of, even in my initial watching of AEW when I was first watching it in like 2019, and she was like running as the world champ. Like the whole gimmick she was kind of doing before, and like the look she had before, like was super dope. But like her coming back and kind of doing that tag team with Alex, who I mentioned earlier, and stuff like that, it was super cool. The look was super like, it was kind of like a 180 from like the all black and stuff like that, but it was super cool, and I enjoy the gimmick now. I don't think she's gonna win though. I don't think Hayter kind of has the momentum that she did when she was initially kind of running with the title, I think. But I do think that this match here is gonna like could potentially steal the show, because both these women like are like at the top of their game. I think Thelka too as well, with just recently of winning the title and in such an upset way, and becoming such a legit great heel for the women's division, and how she like taunts the fans and just her mannerisms and what she does. I think Monet is also like the blueprint on an amazing like women's heel, but you know, I do think that Thelka is really asserting herself as one of those like top heels kind of right now. So I kind of see her reign kind of going on. I don't think it's going to cut short, unfortunately for Hayter, even though I do want to see Hayter at some point again have a nice long like injury-free title reign where she gets to have a lot of bangers, you know what I mean? But I do think this match is going to be really fun, but I think Thelka's going to be taking this here with like some shenanigans from her squad. It's going to be a banger for the world title, but I do see Thelka kind of taking it with some like shenanigans or something like that. And our ultimate match that we kind of have here for the AEW world title, it is the second AEW world title match between MJF and Kenny Omega, which once again another potential show stealer between these two of some of the best in the world right now. I do see MJF kind of taking this one just because, like I said, I don't think, since he did kind of win a title relatively recently, and I think after that banger of a defense from Hangman and him, you know, I do kind of see MJF kind of going on maybe a longer title run here. I do think there is kind of a legitimacy to Kenny kind of going on another legit, I think, world title run to kind of really cement his legacy, you know what I mean? But I do think the one title run that he did have kind of already did that, you know, as the belt collector. So for me, you know, personally, I don't think it's really too much lost if Omega does lose here. I think MJF has a lot to gain in another, I mean, he has a victory over Omega in a classic match. I remember on Collision, that was really good. But I do think that, you know, MJF is the one that has kind of more to gain here from it, whereas Kenny is kind of on the wind down of his career, essentially. It wouldn't be bad if Omega did win here, but I do think it serves more purpose to have MJF be that top heel that, you know, Darby can, and Ospreay and a lot of these guys can kind of chase and vie after. You know, I think there's more vitality in having MJF as champ, I think, as well, compared to Omega, where it's like, I mean, every match that Omega would have, essentially, because it already kind of is, would be a dream match. So I kind of do see the equity in Omega as your champion, essentially. But, you know, we'll kind of see, I guess, how that kind of goes, because then you could have the eventual storytelling of like Omega allowing Hangman to challenge him for that title again due to like their past relationship and their context, which makes total sense. You'll see kind of what happens there. I do think, though, you know, if I were to, you know, make a prediction like I am here, it definitely is going to be MJF kind of taking it, you know, with some MJF shenanigans, you know, and using his brain, his wherewithal, and like his, you know, whatever he has up his sleeve to come up with the win here against the best bout machine. It's kind of interesting though, because I feel like, especially with, you know, Swerve, with what was happening with Swerve, with, you know, MJF and Speedball and those guys, like there's a lot of factors that could kind of tilt it in either way, but I do think MJF is going to take it here. That's my those are all my predictions for AEW Dynasty. Let me know what you guys kind of think and who you guys think is going to be taking home gold. I do think it's going to be a heel kind of heavy kind of show at the top, so I do think like a lot of the early stuff, or like, you know, the FTR is going to lose their belts here, and I do think like, you know, we're going to have like the Young Bucks kind of get the W here as well, but we'll see what happens. You know, I could be totally wrong, but it's going to be the first AEW show I kind of get to see or pay-per-view I get to see in real time. I mean, like Revolution I got to watch, but it wasn't till after the fact when I was kind of going back and watching through everything, you know, so this is going to be fun to kind of be with everybody essentially as like things are happening. So let me know what you guys kind of think, and if you guys are excited for Dynasty, I'll see you guys in the next video.